Could the mass slavery of millions of people or even the Holocaust happen today? We'll try to answer this question on Talking with Henrietta, coming up next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Welcome to the show. World history is marked by mass genocides, mass enslavements, wars, and countless unthinkable traumas that human beings inflict on one another. But are there any kinds of programs or activities going on globally, within countries, or between countries to prevent the worst of human history from repeating itself? On this show, I'll talk with two members of a global organization, Facing History and Ourselves, who will discuss the organization and the work that they are doing to educate young people to make informed and compassionate choices. To my left is Jack Weinstein, who is the San Francisco Regional Director of Facing History and Ourselves. Prior to assuming his position in 1997, Jack served as a teacher and staff development specialist for the Milpitas Unified School District for 18 years. Susie Richardson is seated on my right. Susie serves as a trustee on Facing History and Ourselves' San Francisco Bay Area Advisory Board. She has also served as a member and is the president of the Palo Alto Unified School District's Board of Education. Well, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
As you heard, I mentioned the Holocaust, mass enslavement. Are those things, the type of events that could happen today?
Unfortunately, yes. And terrible things are happening all over the world today. And kids are suffering and families are suffering, people are suffering close to home and around the world.
On the scale of the Holocaust?
Well, you look at the deaths, you look at what's going on in the Congo and Somalia, there are bad things happening.
Jack?
Well, you can look at just in the last few days, it was the 20th anniversary of the Rwandan genocide, in which over 800,000 innocents were slain, and it happened over a period of about 3 months. That's a modern day genocide, and there are unfortunately corollaries to it in a lot of other places in the world. So yes, the answer is yes. These things are not only possible, but they happen in various scales and in various locations and for various reasons. But at the root of all of it is about inhumanity and a blindness to what other people can bring to the world, and it needs to be addressed educationally and otherwise.
So, Susie, Jack just said at the root of it. What do you think is at the root of the types of, and we could call them tragedies?
You know, I think that that's something that if we knew, they wouldn't happen anymore. I remember hearing one Facing History student talking about her experience. She was actually in conversation with Elie Wiesel, and she was posing to him the question of whether these activities are part of human nature.
And Elie? Who is Elie? For the audience, those who may not know.
So Elie Wiesel is the author of more than 35 books. He is a survivor of Auschwitz and eventually Buchenwald concentration camps. He is, in some people's estimation, one of the foremost spokespeople for addressing genocide and issues of human rights in the world today. He's a Nobel Peace Prize winner who's still active on the world stage, and he's a voice of conscience in our society today.
And I interrupted.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, I think I'll leave that story I'll finish
go
that.
ahead,
Well,
yes.
she was saying that she went to a school where all the kids looked a lot like her. They had the same complexion, they had the same intellectual interests, they had similar families. It was a very small school, and yet she was mercilessly bullied. and she was trying to understand what is it that makes people tend to identify somebody and then act in inhumane ways.
Did she get an answer?
She did not.
But in our educational work, we are as interested in the ability for people to ask the questions and reflect on what they think as we are on what some answer might be from an expert. And we think that the power lies in the opportunity to reflect on our own choices and on our own behaviors and on history as a set of lessons that we can learn from, so that when this child asked that question, the answer that came her way in conversation wasn't a pat answer. It wasn't something you'd find in a textbook, but in essence, it was an answer about the idea that anything that a human being can do is part of human nature. So we are all capable of angelic or beastly behavior, and then it's a matter of choice making.
Well, it's so sad when you think, reflecting on what you've just now said, anything that we can do is a part of human nature. I mean, we are human beings, but it's sad to think that there are such depths to which we can go as human beings.
But I think that what I've come to believe is that through education, we can make each other aware of points of danger, what propaganda can do, what happens when you start. In Facing History, one of the things we look at is the power of labels. And when you start labeling people, it, in a sense, gives permission to other people to behave in inappropriate ways because that person is something. And we really challenge kids to think about that. And we challenge kids to think about concepts like we and they. Me
And calling
and you.
people wetbacks or gooks or dinks, or it's to kind of put them in a corner as if they're not human.
Nomenclature counts. If you can name it, you can categorize it, and you can label it. You can choose to do that for a variety of reasons. For some people, that's a survival skill. We all go through life doing that in order to understand our surroundings and what we have to navigate in the world. But we can choose to use that information for positive or negative results. And education is an opportunity for people to make wiser choices based on other people's experiences. As educators, if we didn't believe that change was possible, why would we ever enter a classroom?
Sure. Now, having said all of that, we have a video about facing history and ourselves that'll give us some context. In fact, we have two along the way. And I'll let the crew tell me when we're ready to see the first one. So if we're ready. I decided to start with this one.
Dear teacher, I am a survivor of a concentration camp. My eyes saw what no man should witness. Gas chambers built by learned engineers, children poisoned by educated physicians, infants killed by trained nurses, women and babies shot and burned by high school and college graduates. So I am suspicious of education. My request is, help your students become human. Your efforts must never produce learned monsters, skilled psychopaths, and educated Eichmanns. Reading, writing, arithmetic are important only if they serve to make our children more human. The first time I read this letter, I thought about my education in Memphis. I thought about how I could sit in a civics class across the street from the zoo, and the zoo said at one entrance, colored day only on Thursday, and the others, no whites on Thursday. And I'm in a civics class with the ability to get an A on a Bill of Rights exam. What's going on here that the teacher never talks about that?
A lot of history has been hidden from us. I'm presuming is because we can't handle it. Facing History provides the tools in order for us to face the history and actually discuss the matters in a proper manner.
I am empowering my students to recognize that they have the ability and the obligation and the responsibility to take charge of their communities, to hold their politicians responsible, to make sure that they vote in every election.
Facing History is a global organization, and it's reaching teachers in all different environments, and each of those teachers are able to affect lives in their classrooms every single day.
I was in South Africa and had the opportunity to observe teachers and students there using Facing History to allow students to confront the past of apartheid and the struggle against apartheid.
If you believe in hope and in the prevention of violence and ultimately the prevention of genocide, you have to make educated policymakers.
Being part of Facing History kind of made me see that it's not always about where I want to go in life and what I need to do to get money or to be successful, that is also taking some time to give back.
If we could expand Facing History and the curriculum and the way that we teach the curriculum to all the schools across the country, across the world, it would change the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about how I often explain Facing History to myself and to others. And I think Facing History is an opportunity for teachers and students to flex their moral muscles. So that students, or we as human beings, are prepared to deal with the dilemmas that come our way. Life is complicated. That video was Margot Sternstrom, who is the founder of Facing History. She founded it when she was teaching middle school, now 38 years ago. And she said I heard her say early on in my involvement with Facing History, is if the only thing we do is make history messy, we will have accomplished something. Because I think that the way we teach history today is as if it's orderly, and there's a cause and there's an effect, and you can simply march along the timeline. And there's nothing orderly about what's happened.
Well, I'm thinking there is order in terms of a sequence of events. Do you think?
But events are created by people.
Making choices.
No.
Yes.
It's very interesting. In that video, Margot said that the Holocaust was caused by educated engineers who built the camps, by educated people who gave the orders. And she said, we're about making people human. Now, we just now talked about the depths to which humans can go. So someone would say, but these were all educated people involved in.
So what's at stake is the definition of what it means to be educated.
And the type of education.
And the type of education one has. And that is something that we have an opportunity to have an impact on through Facing History's work.
Now, it was just now talked about to flex the moral muscle. Yeah. Was it that these people weren't flexing their moral muscles?
It's a complicated question, right? The German model of education during the Holocaust was very shaped by the politics of the era. Teachers in Nazi Germany took a Nazi loyalty oath in order to keep their jobs. People organized curriculum so that if you were a 14-year-old boy in a math class, your mathematics problems were often about the trajectory of artillery that would be meant to, kill the enemy. Young women were segregated in German schools so that they were learning how to be the mothers of a master race. They were learning homemaking skills more than they were learning critical thinking. So education was a political endeavor, and people were making choices at a very high level in that situation about how to shape their society using the tools of education, I should say misusing the tools of education in order to achieve a very particular kind of set of goals.
So yes.
I think there was a lot of false science created. There were ideas that you could measure the heads of a person, and if it was the circumference.
Is it eugenics or?
Yes.
Well, eugenics is a whole another piece that we definitely address in our American Civil Rights units. and in science classes.
But
what is a Jew? In Germany, it was somebody who had a nose that was a certain length and a head that it was a certain size. You know.
But the Germans had been known for producing some of the world's best-known philosophers and scientists, and there was a long tradition, supposedly, of education. And so you talked about it being used politically. Is it being used in places politically today?
Surely it is. There's no doubt that it is. The wars in this society, the intellectual thinking, the spectrum of ideas about what the purpose of education should be is always something that people are wrestling over. What's the purpose of education in America today? Is it to produce a workforce? Is it to produce a critical thinking, a set of people who can think critically and analytically? Should it be about
what?
Well, that's the question, and that is part of the debate that's going on in American education today. And there are a lot of different points of view about it, and they show up in a lot of the policies that are about American education today.
Is it a political decision that in many countries in the world, when, girls can't go to school?
Yes.
Sounds like a political decision to me. It sounds like education being used politically.
Yeah, but you know, you said a word that's very powerful. You talked about moral muscles. Now, these people, I shouldn't say these people, but the people in other countries who believe that women should stay home, they would say they're flexing their moral muscles. So who defines the morality and what is moral?
So when I talk about flexing a moral, preparing or your moral muscles, if I go to the gym and I'm lifting weights, I'm preparing to be able to pick something up that's heavy, theoretically. And so when I say that we want kids to be able to flex their moral muscles, we want them to be able to be prepared to make difficult decisions.
In a certain way?
No, absolutely not.
So if they're not going to make decisions in a certain way, they could very well participate in an event like the Holocaust. What type of education is facing history and ourselves giving students so that they don't participate in events
we're certainly not morally neutral at facing history, nor is American public education neutral. We are empowered by the state frameworks and by the expectations of the society codified in the education code to teach toward a certain set of ideas about what it means to be a participatory member of society. We value that. Those rules are codified in the policies of elected officials, in the policies of school boards. We value community service. We value positive, affirmative participation. We value the opportunity to say we don't deny the history that we know. We affirm the opportunity for people to make choices about how they participate in a spectrum, but within the rule of law, within the opportunities to make a contribution. Those are values that we don't have to be neutral about in society any more than we have to be neutral about whether people should stop at a red light on the street.
And we value self-respect.
Yeah.
And tied to that, we value the idea of other people respecting someone else's space, someone else's choices.
Now, when you talk about history, it's said that history is made by the victors. So what history that's facing history?
Well, we love the opportunity to honor multiple perspectives. So we use the perspectives of people. It's important for children who are studying about what's happening in another place to read the voices of people that are there from a variety of positions. It's important for people to understand that they can apply what they know already, what their families have taught them, what they've learned in their society, to question what they may hear. It's important for young people to have a spectrum of ideas presented to them, but within the opportunities that the education code and that the state frameworks prescribe after a long period of opportunity to shape those ideas around the norms and the expectations of the society in which they live. And that there's always an opportunity to flex their muscles in a facing history classroom. We want them to ask critical questions. We want them not to be satisfied with the topical answers. We want them to know that the sources they might go after have to be credible, along a rubric of how you describe what a credible source might be. We want them to use primary sources. We want them to hear the voices of multiple people as they learn to move forward in the world.
You know, I think if you look at our work in South Africa, you can get some insight into the answer to that question. So here you have just a major change with apartheid falling, and you've got this situation where you've got apartheid in the building of a civil society. That's a history that's being made. It's a history that the ramifications and the progress is now. And so, do you wait until you have enough perspective to teach it? Can you wait? Can you wait to, who's going to write the history? The history isn't complete at this point, this critical history. So Facing History was invited in to work with South Africans at the university in Cape Town and develop a way that South African students could consider what had happened and where they were and where they might be going. And one of the tools of that consideration was comparing and contrasting elements of apartheid in the building of a civil society to what had gone on in Germany.
You know, as you talk, I was thinking, what is it that causes people to act inhumane? And I think there is fear. There might be scarcity.
Absolutely.
Insecurity. And I'm thinking we have scarcity now, you would think, around us. So
we have hate crimes around us.
Surely.
Are they ever justified?
Hate crimes?
Hate crimes are never justifiable.
They
might be explainable. They might be able to be deconstructed. You might be able to come to some understanding of how they evolved, but they're never excusable.
Given people's fears, given people's insecurities, given scarcity, given all of the things that make people afraid, the differences among us, you're saying things like that are never justifiable.
Well, actually, I would be curious about what that conversation would sound like in a classroom of 35 15-year-olds who had been studying either apartheid in South Africa or the Holocaust or the American Civil Rights Movement or the history of Jim Crow. I would love to put that question, rather than answer it, and this is vintage Facing History. I may have an answer as an individual that I believe, or even, I may have a set of ideas in my own head, but my role as an educator should be to help other people, other students especially, come to clarity in their own thinking about those ideas. And that's a practice field for democracy, for civil discourse, for agreeing to disagree, for thinking together and being allowed to change one's mind with new information evolving. I would love to take that question to a group of 15-year-olds here in Palo Alto and see what the spectrum of ideas might be and have them explaining their perspectives to each other, and then stop them in the middle and say, has anyone heard anything that's especially interesting that relates to a point of view that they didn't hold 5 minutes ago? What was that? What will you do with that? Does anyone want to change their position on the spectrum of ideas as a result of this conversation? That's the kind of education that I'm looking for, and that's what we train teachers to be able to do more readily than they might if they were lockstep walking through a textbook on the way to a high-stakes standardized test. That's the kind of moment we want to see in classrooms more and more over time.
And if you do take a question like that and present it to the students, please let me know. I would love to get the feedback, and it would be great if we could even do it here.
I think those things happen in Facing history classrooms all the time.
All the time.
I would think
and Facing History is when really difficult things happen, particularly affecting students that are in the news. Facing History teachers are often the resource in their school to have difficult conversations. During 9/11, I mean, Jack can talk about being in Fremont and what was needed to bring people into conversation.
Jack, remember that, because we're going to see another video. And afterwards, we'll talk about being in Fremont after 9/11. So I think we're ready for the other video.
Terrific.
We all have these elements within us. The ability to be a perpetrator, bystander, or upstander. You have a choice, but how do you learn to make complicated choices? Facing history and ourselves teaches students to think for themselves and to widen their perspectives. Why is that so important? Because people make choices, and choices make history. We begin by acknowledging that history is the human story. And to understand it, we must first understand ourselves. A Facing History class might start by asking a student, what shapes who you are as an individual and as a community? An identity chart is one way to look at this. So what is Facing History's identity? For starters, we're a global education organization. From disturbing lessons of the Holocaust and other genocides to struggles for civil rights from Birmingham to South Africa, we trust students to wrestle with complex moments in human history and work to help them understand the range of human behavior. And through those studies, we seek to combat racism, anti-Semitism, prejudice, and stereotypes. And because we know that the lifeblood of democracy is active, informed citizens, we help young people become upstanders. To accomplish this, we provide teachers with professional development through workshops, seminars, and online learning, and mentor them throughout their careers. We create teacher resources such as lesson plans, publications, media, and more. Those teachers then reach 3 million middle and high school students worldwide. Facing History gets results that have been documented in more than 100 studies. 93% of Facing History students are more likely to recognize the dangers of racial or religious stereotyping. 83% are more likely to help if they see someone being bullied. And more than half of Facing History students are more apt to get involved in their school, community, or world. So what happens in a Facing History classroom to achieve such transformational results? Well, it's taught with a high standard of academic rigor, and there's lots of interaction. But the key to our success is in our approach to learning. Allow us to illustrate. Lesson 1. We promote creative solutions. Connect these 9 dots with 4 lines and don't lift your pencil. If you're like most people, you'll work within the box created by the dots. But to find the solution, you have to think outside the box. Facing History students are encouraged to think outside the constructs that have been created by norms, stereotypes, and dogma. Lesson 2. We teach students to think critically and independently. In a famous study, seminary students were sent to another building to give a talk about the Good Samaritan. Along the way, they encountered a man slumped in an alleyway. Overall, 40% stopped to offer help. When the students were told beforehand that they must hurry, only 10% stopped to help, and these were good people. Facing History students are taught to question their actions or inaction and to not blindly follow instruction. Lesson 3. We encourage questions and deep investigation. Pol Pot, Hitler, Stalin, Talat Pasha, Idi Amin. Is it enough to know the names of the dictators? Or do we dig deeper to determine the climate and causes that led to their rise to power, to avoid future crimes against humanity? Facing History students understand that while it's important to know facts and figures, change comes from asking questions and applying historical knowledge. So we've all seen the terrifying rise in hate groups and how the world is becoming increasingly polarized. And yet, we rarely learn civics, how to participate in communities, understand one another, or simply how to be more humane. Facing History does this. Right now, 30,000 teachers use Facing History materials in their classrooms. 3 million students each year are impacted. Impressive. To scale, here's what that looks like. If we want to create a world of thinking, involved, empathetic people, Facing History's reach is going to have to look a lot more like this. Help us. Tell people about Facing History. Tell every educator you know. Tell your colleagues, friends, and neighbors. Donate. With more money, we reach more teachers and students. Be generous. The greater Facing History's presence, the greater the opportunity we all have of living in a more just and humane world. The world needs Facing History, and we need you. Any questions?
Yes, I have some more questions.
I thought you would. I knew you would.
And we'll talk
We like
about
your questions.
Fremont. But
Sure.
before we do, in the video we just saw how Facing History and ourselves gets results. What type of results was the narrator talking about?
So the film references over 100 studies that have been done of Facing History's work over the past 37 years. Some of the more recent studies have actually been double-blind studies by outside agencies, not done by people from within Facing History's network of connected educators. And some of those studies have indicated an increased historical understanding, an increase in student engagement, and really importantly for the structures of education in this country at this time, I think teacher efficacy, the sense that teachers who are deeply connected with Facing History, in these studies, it's indicated that they feel an increased sense of efficacy of their own work. And that's a very important measurement because it means that they may be more likely to stay with their work rather than moving out of the field. We don't know
So you're
that that's
saying
the case,
that the
but
teachers themselves feel more satisfied in
correct.
terms of what they're doing?
more connected to the subject matter they teach, more convinced that the subject matter leads to the kinds of results that they would like to see as educators, more connected to their students, and they derive the benefit of working with students that are more likely to be engaged and deeply moved by what they're studying.
So what does he mean? And I could very well ask Jack, but I'll ask you, Susie, when he talks about student engagement.
Oh, well, I think that if you walked into a Facing History classroom, you would probably not find kids dozing off in the back of the room. I think that so often in a classroom, the model is for teachers to pour what they know into the students, you know, like open your head and here it comes. And Facing History teachers believe that students should really work with the information, work with each other, and that they should find their own answers.
Ah, so the answers might not very well be the answers that lead to human compassion? I mean, if people are going to think for themselves, they can come up with all kinds of conclusions.
Well, I mean, I think that that's true, but there's a frame. So I'll give you an example. In the Holocaust, you know, here we are, you're in Germany. I'm in Germany, let's say. I'm Protestant. I have 3 kids, and I live in a village, and my next door neighbor is Jewish and has 3 kids. Do I take them into my house and hide them to protect them, putting my own kids at risk?
What kind of relationship do you have with your neighbor?
We're friends. We've lived next door for 10 years. But the question is something that we might call what is your universe of obligation? So
am I my brother's keeper?
It's exactly that question.
It is exactly that question, but you have to put that with the question of what's your responsibility to keeping your own children safe?
Yes,
and
exactly.
The whole point of that question is that there's not a right or wrong answer.
Oh,